Black Hollow Road. It even sounds ominous, doesn't it? That's where this all started. A quiet, forgotten stretch of road in rural North Carolina. The kind of place where the trees seem to press in close and shadows linger a little too long. I was driving through on a whim, one crisp autumn afternoon, when I spotted a hand-painted sign, barely legible, announcing a garage sale. I wasn't really looking for anything specific, but something about that sign, the way it was half hidden behind a tangle of overgrown vines, drew me in. It felt like a secret waiting to be uncovered. There wasn't much on display, just a few odds and ends scattered on a rickety card table, some chipped china, a dusty stack of Reader's Digest condensed novels, and then, I saw it, a mirror. Not just any mirror, mind you. This one was large, ornately framed, and edged with cracks that seemed to spiderweb across its surface. It had this strange, almost magnetic pull. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. An old woman sat in a rocking chair nearby. She looked like she'd been carved from the same wood as the chair itself, all sharp angles and weathered lines. When I asked about the mirror, her smile was slow and crooked, like a branch twisted by the wind. "It has a history," she rasped, her voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Bought it from an estate sale in Raleigh. Belongs in a museum, it does." Her eyes held this unsettling glint, a knowingness that sent a shiver down my spine. But I brushed it off as the ramblings of an old woman. $30 later, the mirror was mine, loaded into the back of my car, its dark surface reflecting the fading light of the autumn afternoon. I remember thinking, even then, that the mirror felt heavy, like it carried more than just its own weight, like something was trapped inside, watching me. Back in my apartment, the mirror seemed out of place. It clashed with the clean lines and modern furniture. It was a relic from another time, another world, and its presence filled the room with a sense of unease. That night, as I passed by the mirror on my way to bed, I swore I saw movement in the reflection, a fleeting shadow, a flicker at the edge of my vision. I turned back, heart racing. But there was nothing there, just me, standing in the dim light, staring at my own reflection. Just your imagination, I told myself. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, twisting its roots deep into my mind. Over the next few days, I started to notice things in the mirror that I couldn't explain. Discrepancies in my reflection. Subtle distortions, like the glass itself was warping my image. My face looked gaunt, my eyes darker than usual, the corners of my mouth twisted into a smile that felt foreign, unsettling. I tried to rationalize it, blamed it on the aging glass, the tricks of the light. But the feeling of unease persisted. It clung to me like a shadow, growing darker with each passing day. And then, one evening, as I walked past the mirror, I saw something that sent a jolt of pure terror through me. My reflection. It was smiling. But I wasn't. I was stone-faced, serious, my mind preoccupied with work, yet there it was, in the mirror. My reflection grinning back at me, a wide, unnatural smile that stretched across its face like a crack in a porcelain mask. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, staring at the impossible image in the mirror. I slowly reached out, my hand trembling, and touched my own lips. They were still, unmoving. My reflection continued to smile. The smile widened, becoming almost predatory, mocking my fear. I stumbled back, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. The feeling of dread, once a seed, had now blossomed into full-blown terror. This was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. I had to get out of there. I needed answers, and I knew where I had to go. Black Hollow Road. I had to find that old woman, the one who sold me the mirror. Maybe she knew something, anything, that could explain what was happening, driven by a desperate hope. I drove back to Black Hollow Road, my mind replaying the unsettling events of the past few days. But as I approached the place where the garage sale had been, my stomach sank. The old woman's house was gone, vanished. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. The only evidence of the house's existence, a crumbling brick foundation and a rusted mailbox leaning precariously to one side. There was no sign of the old woman, no trace of the garage sale, no explanation for the unsettling events that had begun to unravel my life. The mirror's surface seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent glow as I drove away, the setting sun casting long, menacing shadows across the deserted road. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare that was only just beginning. And then, as I glanced in the rear-view mirror, I saw him, for the first time, standing in the back seat of my car, a figure shrouded in darkness, his face obscured by the shadows. But his eyes, those eyes pierced through the gloom, cold and black and filled with an ancient, unspeakable malice. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat, the car skidding to a halt on the deserted road. I whirled around, my breath coming in ragged gasps. But the back seat was empty. There was no one there, just the lingering scent of something cold and rotten, like a grave opened after centuries. My hand trembled as I reached for the ignition, my mind reeling. I had to get out of there, had to get away from that road, from that mirror, from the terror that was closing in on me like a suffocating fog. As I drove away, I could feel his gaze on me, burning into my back. I knew then that I wasn't just dealing with a haunted mirror. I was dealing with something far more sinister, something that had been waiting, patiently, for me to unlock the door to its darkness. The drive back from Black Hollow Road was a blur. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I'd seen, what I'd felt, the emptiness of that lot, where the old woman's house had stood. The figure in my back seat. It was like reality itself was fraying at the edges, the familiar becoming unsettlingly distorted. Back in my apartment, the mirror hung on my wall, seemingly innocuous, but I couldn't look at it without a shiver of fear crawling down my spine. It felt like a watchful eye, constantly observing, waiting for its moment. Sleep offered no respite. Nightmares plagued me. Twisted visions of shadowy figures, whispering voices that promised unimaginable horrors. And always, at the heart of these nightmares, the mirror, its cracked surface reflecting a distorted version of myself, a doppelganger with eyes as black as night. The days that followed were a torment. I became a prisoner in my own home, too terrified to venture out, haunted by the feeling that something dark and malevolent was stalking me. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, a stress-induced hallucination. But deep down, I knew better. The mirror was changing me, twisting my perception, warping my reality. The phone rang, startling me. It was a friend, inviting me out for drinks. I hesitated, a wave of fear washing over me. What if he was there, waiting for me? What if I brought this curse upon anyone who got too close? No. I mumbled, forcing the words out. I'm not feeling well. Maybe another time. I hung up, the silence in the apartment pressing in on me, suffocating me. The mirror seemed to hum with a dark energy, its presence filling the room like a miasma. I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there, waiting for the inevitable. But what could I do? Who could I turn to? This wasn't something you could talk about with a therapist or share with a friend over a beer. This was different. This was something ancient, something evil, and it had latched onto me like a parasite, feeding on my fear, growing stronger with each passing moment. Desperation gnawed at me. I needed answers, a way to fight back, a way to break free from this nightmare. My gaze fell on the mirror, and a thought, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced through my fear. If the mirror was the source of this horror, then maybe it held the key to ending it. I approached the mirror cautiously, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum. I forced myself to meet my reflection's gaze. The figure was still there, lurking behind my image, his features indistinct, his eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. But this time, I didn't flinch. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. The figure didn't speak. It simply stared back at me, its silence more chilling than any words could have been. I reached out, my hand trembling, and touched the mirror's surface. It was cold, smooth, unyielding, and then a jolt, like a surge of electricity, shot through my arm, spreading through my body in a wave of icy pain. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, my vision blurring at the edges. I felt a presence, cold and oppressive, enter the room, and a voice, raspy and ancient, whispered in my ear, "You cannot escape." Panic seized me. I had to get out of there, had to put as much distance between myself and that mirror as possible. I fumbled for my keys, my phone, anything I could grab, and stumbled out of the apartment. Leaving the door wide open behind me, I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, not daring to look back, the chilling whisper echoing in my mind, "You cannot escape." I spent the night in a cheap motel, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the hum of the air conditioner a constant drone against the silence of the room. Sleep eluded me. Every shadow, every flicker of light, sent a jolt of fear through me. I was a fugitive in my own life, running from a terror I couldn't understand, couldn't escape. And as the first rays of dawn crept through the gaps in the curtains, I knew what I had to do. I had to confront this thing, had to find a way to break its hold over me, even if it meant facing my deepest fears, even if it meant staring into the abyss itself. The mirror was waiting for me. I knew it, and I had to be ready. The sun was setting. As I drove back towards my apartment, I knew it was reckless, walking straight back into the lion's den. But there was no other choice. Running wouldn't solve anything. I had to face this, whatever it was. The streets were oddly deserted. As I approached my building, even the usual sounds of the city seemed to have been swallowed by an unnerving silence. I parked the car, my hand trembling as I reached for the keys. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. As I climbed the stairs, each step felt heavy, as if I were dragging an unseen weight behind me. The closer I got, the more intense the feeling of dread became. It was like walking into a tomb, I stood outside my apartment door, key in hand, hesitant to turn the lock. What would I find on the other side? Would he be there, waiting for me? I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and pushed the key into the lock. The click echoed through the hallway, loud and sharp in the oppressive silence. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark, the curtains drawn, casting long, ominous shadows across the room. The air was thick with a musty, almost metallic scent. And then I saw it. The mirror. It wasn't where I'd left it. It was now standing in the middle of the living room, directly in front of the window, bathed in the last rays of the setting sun. Its surface seemed to glow, pulsating with a malevolent energy. And in the reflection, I saw him. He was no longer a shadowy figure, his features obscured by darkness. He was clear, distinct, as real as if he were standing right in front of me, taller than me, gaunt, his skin stretched taut across his skull, revealing the sharp contours of his bones beneath. His eyes, those black, fathomless pits, stared into mine, filled with a cold, predatory hunger in his smile. That smile was the most terrifying thing of all. It wasn't a smile of amusement or pleasure. It was the smile of a predator, savoring the anticipation of the kill. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was paralyzed by terror, rooted to the spot. As he stepped out of the mirror, stepped out. One moment he was a reflection. The next he was standing there, in my living room, flesh and blood, or whatever substance animated his horrifying form. He moved slowly, deliberately, his gaze never leaving mine. As he approached, the temperature in the room plummeted. The air grew thick, making it hard to breathe. The metallic scent intensified, now mingled with the odor of decay, like something long dead. He stopped, just inches away from me. I could feel his breath on my face, cold and fetid, like the air from an open grave. "You shouldn't have come back," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves grinding together. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I was trapped, not just by fear, but by something else, something emanating from him, a force that held me captive, body and soul. He reached out, his hand skeletal, the skin stretched tight across the bones, and touched my face. The touch was like ice, sending a jolt of pain through me, a pain that seemed to burrow deep into my bones, into my very essence. "You are mine now," he whispered, his eyes burning into me. And then I felt a pulling sensation, a tugging at my core. I looked down, and to my horror, I saw my feet, fading. They were becoming translucent, ghostly, disappearing. I looked back at the mirror and I saw it, my reflection. It wasn't me anymore, it was him. He was replacing me, stealing my image, my identity, my very being. He smiled, that terrifying, predatory smile. You should have left it alone. The darkness closed in, engulfing me, pulling me into the mirror's depths. And then, nothing. I'm not sure how long I've been here. Time has no meaning in this place. It's cold, dark, a void of infinite emptiness. And he is here, always, watching, waiting. He says I am his now, that I belong to him. I see glimpses of the world outside, reflected in the mirror's surface, but it feels distant, unreal, like a fading memory. I don't know if I can escape. I don't know if I even exist anymore. But one thing I know for sure, you should have left it alone. A package arrived today, no return address, just your name scrolled on the front, almost like a child's handwriting. Inside, a worn notebook filled with frantic scribbles, sketches, and a chilling story. The story of Jack. The story starts simply enough. Jack, seeking solace and a fresh start, chose the quiet mountain town of Bryson City, North Carolina. Tucked away in the Smoky Mountains, life there was peaceful, perfect for someone like Jack, who preferred solitude. He found work with a logging company and lived in a small cabin by the Nantahala River. A simple life away from the noise of the world. Bryson City, a sanctuary, at least. That's what Jack thought it would be, until he showed up. Ben. Imagine the unsettling feeling of being pulled back into a past you tried so hard to outrun. Jack's sitting in a diner, finishing his coffee. When he hears someone say his name, he turns. And there he is, Ben, a ghost from his high school days, someone he hasn't seen in 15 years, vanished. And yet, there he was, sitting across from him. Same easy smile, same familiar charm. At first, Jack's relieved, even happy to see a familiar face. Ben tells him he's just passing through, visiting. But anyone who knows Bryson City knows. It's not exactly on the way to anywhere. Why would Ben be here, in this remote mountain town? After all these years, what could possibly draw him to this place? As they talk, a creeping unease starts to settle in. Ben starts finishing Jack's sentences, mentioning things about his life he couldn't possibly know, like the name of his dog, Max, or the fact that he's seeing a woman named Jessica. Details Jack hasn't told a soul. It's as if Ben has been watching him, studying his every move, but the real nightmare was just beginning. That night, Jack's at home, reading by the wood stove. It's nearly midnight when he hears a knock at the door. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, no one just drops by. A shiver runs down your spine as you read Jack's account. You can almost feel the isolation of that cabin, the darkness pressing in from all sides. He opens the door, and there he is, Ben. Hands in his pockets, greeting like he's been waiting all night. Hope I'm not interrupting, Ben says, walking right in before Jack can even respond. The violation is palpable, and Jack, stunned, manages to ask, How? How did you know where I lived? Ben just grins that familiar, unsettling smile, looking around the cabin like he owns the place. It's just like old times, Jack, he says. His voice smooth, almost hypnotic. Some people. They're just meant to stay connected, don't you think? What is it about those words that sends a chill down your spine? It's more than just the intrusion, the violation of Jack's sanctuary. It's the implication that Ben believes he has a claim on Jack, a connection that transcends time and distance. And then, things take a truly dark turn. Ben starts reminiscing about high school, dredging up memories Jack has tried so desperately to bury. There was a night in particular, a night that ended in tragedy, a secret they'd both sworn to keep hidden, something they did, something they witnessed, a darkness that had stained their souls. Jack has nearly convinced himself it was all a bad dream, but Ben remembers it all with chilling clarity. Do you ever think about her? Ben asks, his voice suddenly cold, his eyes losing their warmth. You know, after what happened, Jack doesn't want to think about it, let alone talk about it. But Ben won't let it go. He keeps recounting that night. They're packed. The things they promised never to mention again. The memory hits Jack like a physical blow, pulling him back into a past he's desperately trying to escape. He feels trapped, suffocated by the weight of his guilt, the terror that has haunted him for years. And now, Ben is here, forcing him to confront the darkness he's kept hidden for so long. It's as if Ben is the embodiment of that guilt, a physical manifestation of the secrets that claw the edges of Jack's sanity. The next day, Jack tries to go about his business. Desperate for a sense of normalcy, he tries to convince himself that Ben's visit was just a bad dream, a figment of his guilt-ridden imagination. But it's no use. Ben is everywhere. Jack turns a corner, and there he is, watching. With that same unnerving smile, he goes to the store, and Ben is waiting in the parking lot. He tries to take a walk along the river, seeking solace in the beauty of nature. But even there, Ben finds him, sitting on a bench, watching him. With those knowing eyes, it's like Ben can anticipate his every move, as if he's always one step ahead. The feeling of being watched, hunted, starts to eat away at Jack's sanity. He can't sleep, can't eat. Every time he closes his eyes, he sees Ben's face. That smile, those eyes, that seem to pierce through his soul. He's losing his grip on reality, and the isolation of Bryson City, once a refuge, now feels like a prison. One night, as Jack lies in bed, trying to will himself to sleep, he hears it, a faint scratching sound, coming from outside his window. His heart pounds in his chest. He tries to tell himself it's just a branch against the glass, but deep down, he knows it's something more. And then he hears it, Ben's voice, soft, almost a whisper, just outside his window. Jack. The voice slithers through the darkness, sending chills down your spine. Are you awake? Jack freezes, paralyzed by fear. He holds his breath, hoping Ben will go away. But the whispering continues, his name, over and over, like a serpent coiling around his sanity. He doesn't remember falling asleep that night, only waking up exhausted, his nerves frayed, his mind teetering on the edge of madness, and still doesn't stop. Ben keeps appearing, always watching, always reminding him of the past. He can't escape. The town of Bryson City, once a sanctuary, now feels like a hunting ground, and Jack is the prey, driven to the brink. Jack decides to confront Ben. He drives out to a remote area near an old campground, the place Ben mentioned during one of his haunting visits. It was a place they used to go as kids, a place filled with memories, both good and bad. Jack figures if he can just get some answers, maybe, just maybe, he can make this nightmare end. But when he arrives, the campground is deserted. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of pine needles and something else, something unseen, something unsettling. It's as if the entire forest is holding its breath, watching, waiting. He calls out Ben's name, his voice echoing through the empty trees. Silence, and then he hears it, a faint, familiar laugh, drifting on the wind, beckoning him deeper into the woods. He follows the sound, his heart pounding in his chest, fear and adrenaline coursing through his veins. The trees close in around him, the sunlight filtering through the branches in eerie pattern. He feels like he's being watched, followed, but he can't shake the feeling that he's walking into a trap. He finds Ben standing by the edge of a clearing, his back turned. Ben, Jack shouts, his voice hoarse with fear and exhaustion. Ben turns slowly, that same chilling smile plastered on his face. I knew you'd come, Jack, he says, his voice soft, almost gentle. Some things, they just have a way of drawing you back, don't they? He starts talking about that night again, about the girl, the secret that binds them together. You think you can bury the past, Jack. His voice grows colder, harder. You think you can just forget. Jack tries to turn away, to escape the accusing eyes, the suffocating presence. But Ben reaches out, grabbing his arm with an iron grip. His touch is cold, lifeless, like the hand of a corpse. "You owe me, Jack," he whispers, his eyes flashing with a strange light, a mixture of anger and something else, something ancient, something evil. "We made a promise. We're bound together. Forever." Terror, pure and consuming, grips Jack's heart. Ben's words echo in his mind, a chilling prophecy that seems to seal his fate. It's as if Ben can see right through him, into the darkest recesses of his soul, and he knows that there is no escape, no redemption. He's trapped, bound to Ben, by a secret that will haunt him for the rest of his days. He wrenches himself free from Ben's grasp and runs, crashing through the underbrush, not daring to look back. He doesn't stop until he reaches his car, his lungs burning, his mind reeling. But even now, safe in the relative comfort of his car, he can't escape the feeling of being watched, hunted. It's as if Ben is everywhere, waiting, watching, biding his time. Jack drives back to his cabin, his sanctuary. But even within its familiar walls, he finds no peace. He's a prisoner in his own home, trapped by the fear that gnaws at his soul. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside his window sends shivers down his spine. He jumps at shadows, his nerves shot, his mind teetering on the brink of collapse. He tries to convince himself that it's all in his head, that Ben is just a figment of his guilt-ridden imagination. But deep down, he knows the truth. Ben is real, and he's not going away. He barricades himself inside the cabin, locks the doors, bolts the windows, but nothing can keep out the fear that seeps into every corner of his existence. He's a prisoner in his own home, a captive of the terror that Ben has unleashed. One night, as darkness falls, and shadows stretch across the walls of his cabin, Jack hears a sound. It's a soft sound, almost imperceptible, but it sends a surge of adrenaline through his veins. He knows that sound. It's the sound of the front door opening, slowly, deliberately. He sits frozen in his chair, his heart pounding in his chest, his eyes fixed on the door. He hears footsteps approaching, slow, measured steps that seem to echo the rhythm of his own racing heartbeat. And then he sees him, Ben, standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed against the faint moonlight filtering through the window. His eyes glint in the darkness, and that same chilling smile plays across his lips. Jack doesn't understand how he got in. The doors were locked, the windows bolted. But there he is, standing in his home, as if he'd materialized from the shadows themselves. "It's time, Jack," Ben says, his voice low, almost gentle, but with an underlying current of menace that chills Jack to the bone. "You can't run from this. You can't hide. We're bound together, you and I, forever." And then, silence. The notebook ends there. Abruptly, Jack's fate, unknown, the words on the page, stop. But the story, the feeling, lingers. It seeps into your mind, leaving you with a profound sense of unease. The silence after Ben's final words is deafening. He's gone, vanished as quickly as he appeared, leaving Jack in a state of terror. We can only imagine. Every instinct in Jack's being must have screamed at him to run, to flee this place, this town, this past that clings to him like a shroud. But where can he go? Where can anyone hide from something that seems to exist both inside and outside of them? A specter woven into the very fabric of their being. The notebook offers no answers, only a haunting echo of Jack's terror. It ends with that chilling declaration, forever. The weight of that word presses down, suffocating any hope of escape. Is Jack still trapped in that cabin, his mind shattered by Ben's relentless torment? Or did he manage to break free, only to find himself forever looking over his shoulder, searching every shadow, for a glimpse of that knowing smile, that chilling whisper of his name? We're left with questions, unease clinging to us, like the mountain fog that blankets Bryson City. What was the pact made on that night so long ago? What darkness binds these two men, a darkness that seems to transcend the boundaries of time and space? And most importantly, what became of Jack? Did he succumb to the terror that consumed him, or did he find a way to fight back, to confront the ghost that haunted him? The notebook offers no resolution, only a glimpse into the abyss of fear that can lie hidden beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. It serves as a chilling reminder that the past never truly dies, that sometimes the ghosts we try to bury have a way of clawing their way back into the light, demanding to be seen, to be heard, to claim what they believe is owed. Jack's story ends here, lost in the silence of the mountains, but the question lingers, echoing in the darkness. What would you do if confronted by your own Ben, a specter from your past that refuses to let go? Would you run, or would you stand your ground, facing the darkness head on, determined to break free from the chains that bind you? The answer, listener, lies within you. The notebook is closed, but the story continues in the silence, in the shadows, in the deepest recesses of your mind. Tonight, we're diving into a story. It takes us to a forgotten town, North Carolina, a place where the silence is broken only by the wind and the whispers of a ghost story that just refuses to die. This isn't just some campfire tale, though. This is about a man, our narrator, drawn back to his hometown by something he can't quite explain. He's looking for closure, but what he finds is a mystery that chills him to the bone. The legend of the Midnight Bell. Picture this: a dilapidated church, abandoned for decades, standing like a skeletal finger against the Carolina sky. The bell tower, struck by lightning years ago, silent. Except according to local legend, it's not. Every night at the stroke of 12, the phantom bell tolls. Our narrator remembers this legend from his childhood. He even remembers hearing the bell himself as a kid. His friend Lenny had a chilling explanation. They say it rings for the lost. Even back then, there was something about that bell that unsettled him. But now, returning as an adult, he senses a darkness hanging over the town, a secret buried beneath the surface. The townsfolk are strange. They avoid his questions about the church, their eyes darting away like startled animals. It's as if they're afraid to even speak his name. He gets mumbled warnings about unholy places. Please to let sleeping dogs lie. Even the clerk at the local store, someone he knew from high school, give him a look that sends shivers down his spine. Some things are better left alone, Drew, she says. Her voice barely a whisper. But you know what? Those warnings, they only fuel his obsession. He's pulled towards the church, compelled to uncover the truth. One night he finds himself in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink, and is growing unease. That's where he encounters Elder Jacobson. Now this is where it gets interesting. Jacobson is an old man, his eyes clouded with age, his voice a dry rasp, like wind whistling through a graveyard. When our narrator brings up the church, a shiver runs down his spine as Jacobson leans in close. That bell, he says. His breath sour with secrets. It tolls for souls bound to the earth. Once it rings for you, you don't leave. There's a feverish glint in Jacobson's eyes, a look that tells our narrator he's not dealing with just a harmless old man. Jacobson's words plant a seed of dread in the narrator's mind, but they also solidify his resolve to experience the bell for himself. So armed with a flashlight and a tape recorder, he sets off towards the abandoned church. He arrives just before midnight. You can feel the tension, can't you? That oppressive silence, the darkness pressing in on him, the anticipation hanging heavy in the air. It's as if the town itself is holding its breath. He stands before the church, staring up at the bell tower, his heart pounding in his chest. And as the clock strikes 12, it begins. A deep metallic clang rips through the silence. It's a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, resonating through his bones, vibrating in the air around him. He's frozen in place, the sound echoing in the stillness. He can't help but look up, drawn to the source of the chilling sound. And there, for just a fleeting moment, he sees it. A figure stands in the bell tower, shrouded in shadow, its eyes burning with a cold, inhuman light. The figure stares down at him, a silent watcher in the night. The sound of the bell intensifies, growing louder, more insistent. As the narrator stumbles back, his flashlight flickers, plunging him in darkness for a heartbeat. And in the darkness, he hears a voice, a chilling whisper that cuts through the ringing in his ears. "You'll never leave," it hisses. He runs, flees the church, the image of the figure seared into his mind, the whisper echoing in his ears. Sleep offers no escape. The experience haunts his waking hours. He knows he needs answers, and he knows he has to go back to the church. He begins to delve into the town's history, spending days in the local library, sifting through old documents and whispered rumors. He discovers that the town archives whisper tales of vanished souls, people who disappeared without a trace. Many of them last seen near that very church. One old police report, dated 1976, details the disappearance of a young couple. Witnesses had reported hearing the bell toll 12 times that night, each toll accompanied by a blood-curdling scream that pierced the stillness. Their bodies were never found. Another mystery, another unsolved case, another life swallowed by the shadows surrounding the abandoned church. And here's the thing that truly chills him. After the couple vanished, people started reporting seeing 2 new figures in the bell tower. 2 more shadows added to the collection. He uncovers more stories like this, each more disturbing than the last. The number of disappearances is staggering. For such a small, isolated town, every account, every whispered rumor leads back to the church, back to that phantom bell. It's as if the church itself is a hungry maw, consuming those who dare to venture too close. He feels the pull intensifying, an obsession taking root. He knows he must return, but this time he won't go unarmed. He gathers his equipment, a camera, a voice recorder, and steels himself for a confrontation with whatever lurks in the shadows of the bell tower. He arrives at the church again as midnight approaches, his heart heavy with a sense of foreboding. He sets up his camera, pointing it towards the empty tower. The night grows colder, the air heavy with anticipation. It's as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. And then the first toll rings out. It's louder this time, the sound vibrating through the ground through him, filling the air with an unbearable pressure. He stares through the camera lens, expecting to see nothing but the empty tower. But that's not what he sees. A figure is back, standing in the bell tower, more distinct this time. It's still hazy, wrapped in shadow, but undeniably human in form. and it's staring directly at him.
Terror grips him, but he can't tear his eyes away. The figure lifts its arm, beckoning him forward, and he feels it. A pull, an urge, a compulsion to obey. He wants to step inside the church, to climb the stairs to the bell tower, to stand face to face with the figure in the shadows. His mind screams at him to run, but his body is already moving, as if guided by an unseen force. The cold intensifies, biting at his skin, but he's powerless to stop. He's drawn towards the church, a moth to a flame. His fear, a distant echo drowned out by the insistent ringing of the bell. He pushes open the heavy doors of the church. A blast of frigid air assaults him, pulling him inside, closing the doors behind him with a resounding thud. He's engulfed in absolute darkness. The air is thick with the scent of decay, of dust and mildew, and something else, something ancient and unsettling. He hears faint whispers just at the edge of his hearing, sluthering through the darkness as he moves toward the stairs that lead to the bell tower. Each step he takes brings him closer to the source of the ringing, the sound growing louder, more insistent. The ground trembles beneath his feet, threatening to crack and swallow him whole. He climbs slowly, his breath catching in his throat, the air thick and oppressive. Finally, he reaches the top of the stairs. The final toll rings in his ears, a death knell. He steps into the bell tower. His eyes immediately lock onto the figure. It's closer now, impossibly close. Its features clearer in the dim light filtering through the broken window panes. Its face is pale and hollow, its eyes burning with an emptiness that chills him to the core. He stares, unable to look away, paralyzed by fear and a strange sense of inevitability. And then the figure smiles. It's a cold, dead smile that sends shivers down his spine, confirming his worst fears. In that horrifying moment, the truth slams into him with the force of a thunderclap. This place, this bell, it doesn't just mark the passage of time. It claims those who hear it. It traps them, binds them to the tower as eternal watchers, their souls forever tethered to the phantom ringing. He tries to turn to run to escape, but his legs refuse to obey. He's rooted to the spot, frozen in place, trapped. The final toll echoes through the tower, filling his ears, his mind, his very being. It's all he can hear, all he can feel, until there's nothing left but the sound and the suffocating darkness that descends upon him. He went looking for answers, for closure, but what he found was a fate worse than anything he could have imagined. Trapped by the sound of the bell, his very essence consumed by its haunting toll. It's like the church itself is a magnet drawing in lost souls, feeding on their curiosity, their fear. And those figures in the bell tower, are they the keepers of this terrible secret? Or are they prisoners just like him, bound to the bell for eternity? He realizes in that horrifying moment of clarity that the bell was not merely a haunting sound, but a conduit, a tether that bound souls to the earth. Those who heard its chilling toll, those who ventured too close to its source, became trapped, forever tethered to the tower, their spirits condemned to wander within its shadow. The narrator's desperate attempt to escape was futile. His body, frozen by terror, refused to obey the commands of his mind. He was ensnared, a prisoner of the bell and its sinister purpose. The final toll resonated through him, a wave of sound that washed away his fear, his resistance, his very sense of self. He felt his consciousness slipping, his memories fading, replaced by an emptiness as vast and cold as the night sky. The darkness that enveloped him was not merely the absence of light, but the absence of everything: hope, memory, identity. He was becoming one with the shadows, another lost soul claimed by the midnight bell. His last thought, a fleeting flicker of awareness before the abyss swallowed him whole, was a chilling echo of the whisper he'd heard in the darkness: "You'll never leave." And now the question lingers. What became of our narrator? Did he manage to break free from the bell's grasp, or is he now another shadowy figure, trapped within the tower, his soul forever bound to its haunting toll? The church stands silent now, a testament to the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most innocent-seeming legends. But some say on a still night, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint echo of a bell, ringing out at the stroke of midnight, a chilling reminder of the souls lost to its haunting call.